Alright, so before we look into the first category of financial ratios, which is liquidity ratio, let's first look at this scenario. Okay, so say for example, if one day you have decided that you want to borrow some money for business purposes. Okay, so you have decided to visit this particular bank. Alright, so as you approach the banker may ask you what you actually wanted. Okay, so you tell the banker that you'd like to borrow some money for business use. Alright, now usually when you apply for a loan, the bank will have to assess your ability to pay back before they approve the loan. Okay, so you cannot just say, oh, I want to borrow some money, and then the bank just say yes or no, right? The bank may have to go through some of the documents. They may request for some documents from you, or maybe your company's financial statements. Alright, so let's say the banker tells you that they need some details about your company's liquidity position, and they ask for your financial statements. So you have to provide them with the required documents so that they can go through it. They assess your liquidity position, and then they will decide whether they want to lend the money to you. Okay, so let's say you showed your statement of financial position to the banker. Alright, so in your SFP it states your current assets, the amount of current assets that you have, the amount of current liabilities that you have. Okay, so from here the banker may be able to get some information regarding your ability to pay back your short-term obligations. Okay, so if the banker is satisfied with your records, okay, if they think that, oh, you have a very strong liquidity position, then most probably they will approve your loan. Okay, so if they are happy with your financial statements, with the numbers there, they think that your ability to pay back is strong, then they approve your loan, and of course you'll be happy as well. Okay, because you got the loan approved. Alright, so in what way does the bank evaluate your ability to pay back? So the ratios that they use is what we are learning now. The first category, it's called liquidity ratios. Alright, so liquidity ratio measures the quickness of a firm in converting its non-cash assets to cash. Like I mentioned earlier, you have learned this term liquidity in chapter 2. Okay, so liquidity shows how easily or how quickly your assets can be converted into cash without a significant loss in value. So the banks will most probably be using this liquidity ratios to see whether they think you have the ability to pay them back or not. Alright, so under this category we have two sub-ratios. We have the current ratio. Current ratio, we have formulas given, current assets divided by current liabilities, and also quick ratio. Quick ratio is current assets minus inventories divided by current liabilities. Now all these formulas will be provided in the exam. Okay, so you don't have to memorize the formulas. Okay, we will give you a list of all the formulas. Right, so what is current ratio? Now from the formula just now, we have current ratio equals to current assets divided by current liabilities. So current ratio is used to test a company's liquidity. It is to ascertain whether a company's short-term assets are readily available to pay off its short-term liabilities. Now you can see from this formula that I'm comparing the amount of current assets that you have with the amount of current liabilities that you have. Okay, so say for example, if you have current liabilities of 100 ringgit, and let's say you have current assets of 500, that means theoretically you should have no problem paying back this current liabilities, right? Because you have 500 ringgit of current assets available, which you can use it to pay off your 100 ringgit of current liabilities. Okay, so it ascertains whether you have sufficient short-term assets available to pay off your short-term liabilities. So in theory, the higher the current ratio, the better. Okay, you can see here, the higher the current ratio means you have more current assets compared to current liabilities. So if you have a lot of current assets, then most probably it means that you have no problem paying back, because what you have here, your current assets, are greater than your current liabilities. You can anytime take these assets to pay off the current liabilities. Alright, so we will use this current ratio to measure comparing current assets with current liabilities. Okay, so the higher the current ratio, the better. Alright, then the next one is quick ratio. Quick ratio. Now from the formula just now, we can see that in quick ratio, we use current assets minus inventories divided by current liabilities. Basically, these two ratios, the current ratio and the quick ratio, are quite similar. It's just that in quick ratio computation, we don't use total current assets. We minus off the inventories. Remember when we learned chapter 2, when we learn how to rank the assets in order of liquidity, we say that inventories is the least liquid form of current assets, right? Cash is the most liquid one, followed by cash at bank, and then we have debtors, and we also have inventories. So inventories is the least liquid current asset. Now least liquid current asset means that comparing the 4 types of current assets, this is the one which is most difficult to be converted into cash. So in quick ratio, we do not look at total current assets because we find that inventories may not be easily converted into cash. So we want to minus off this figure. We just want to know the remaining liquid assets that are available. Okay, so you can see here, it measures the amount of the most liquid current assets. So if you minus out inventories, what is left over will be maybe cash, bank, and your accounts receivable. So all these are your liquid current assets. So I am only comparing what is liquid. Okay, I'm only looking at those liquid current assets that I have, and how much do I have here that I can use to cover my current liabilities. Okay, so quick ratio, which is also known as acid test ratio. This is another name, quick ratio, acid test ratio. Okay, so this quick ratio is a more conservative ratio compared to the current ratio because it excludes the least liquid form of current asset, which are more difficult to turn into cash. So same thing, a higher ratio means a more liquid current position. Okay, we look back at the formula. Okay, so if let's say I use current assets, I minus out inventories, but I still have, okay, the remaining figure is your liquid current assets because you have deducted the least liquid one. So your liquid current assets, if they are still able to cover your current liabilities, then yes, you are having a very strong liquidity position. Okay, so let's look at some figures here. Now this is the statement of financial position of this company called Excalibur Corporation. Okay, so this is the name of the company. So if we want to calculate the current ratio, we use the formula given just now, current assets divided by current liabilities. So from the SFP, you can easily get the total current assets 1230. So it actually consists of cash 175, accounts receivable 430, and inventories 625. So the total current assets is 1230 divided by current liabilities of 230. So 1230 divided by 230, you get a current ratio of 5.35 times. So in other words, your current assets are 5.35 times greater compared to your current liabilities. Okay, so you can just get the information from the SFP remember the scenario just now, the banker requested for some documents, so you showed her the statement of financial position, right? So most probably she would have looked at your current assets and comparing it with the current liabilities. Okay, current ratio. Right, so the conclusion here, we say that Excalibur has $5.35 in current assets for every $1 in current liabilities. So for every $1 here, I have $5.35 available to pay off every $1 of this current liabilities. Okay, or we can also say that Excalibur has its current liabilities covered 5.35 times over. Right, so it's quite simple to perform the calculation here. It's just current assets divided by current liabilities, nothing complicated. Alright, so you just have to understand what it means here. 5.35 times also means 535%. 5.35 times. Okay, you are comparing the ratio. And how do we calculate quick ratio? Now from the formula, current assets minus inventories divided by current liabilities. So you can see here, current assets was 1230 minus inventories 625. So you can see after deducting the 625, what is remaining here? The remaining portion here is only cash plus accounts receivable. So now we don't look at every single item of the current assets. We only look at the liquid current assets. We exclude inventories. So only cash plus accounts receivable. Are these enough to pay off the current liabilities of the firm? So 175 and 430. Okay, so it's the same as 1230 minus 625. So we divide by the current liabilities, 230. We find that the answer that we get is 2.63 times. Okay, so it means that for this particular company, even after deducting the inventories, I still have 2.63 times of liquid assets which I can use to pay back this 230 ringgit of current liabilities. Okay, if this is $1, then my liquid current assets will be $2.63. So Excalibur has $2.63 in liquid current assets. How do we differentiate between current ratio and quick ratio? It's whether we are looking at only the liquid current assets. So Excalibur has $2.63 in liquid current assets for every $1 in current liabilities. Or we can say that Excalibur has its current liabilities covered 2.63 times over. Okay, so that's how we compute the quick ratio. Remember, it's also called the acid test ratio. Right, so lastly, we have to do comparison with the industry average. Remember, in the introduction part, we say that we do benchmarking. Okay, we don't just compute the ratio and say, oh, this is 5.35, this is 2.63. We have to compare the ratio with something else. Either we compare it among different years, remember the time trend analysis, or we compare with a similar company, a company in the similar industry. So in this case, we will be comparing with industry average. Industry average means all the companies in the same industry as Excalibur, we take their average ratio, okay, their results on average. So by comparing the results here, we can see that for current ratio, industry average is 5 times, while for Excalibur is 5.35 times. Okay, that means for Excalibur, every $1 of current liabilities that they have 5.35 times of current assets, which they can use to pay off the current liabilities. But for industry average is only 5 times. So you can see that Excalibur has more assets readily available to pay off its current liabilities compared to the industry. Okay, and if we look at acid test ratio, the quick ratio, now this time you find that Excalibur has only 2.63 times, but the industry industry average is 3 times. So in terms of quick ratio, industry is performing better compared to Excalibur. So looking at the current ratio, it appears that Excalibur is more liquid than the industry because it has got 5.35 times current ratio compared to 5 times. It's stronger ability compared to the industry. However, when looking at the acid test ratio is always a better measure compared to current ratio, because here I removed the inventories. I removed what I think is difficult to be converted into cash. I am only looking at liquid current assets. So of course this is a better measure lah. Right? So when looking at the acid test ratio, they are not as liquid compared to the industry, indicating that inventory levels are probably too high. Because if my current ratio is strong, but my acid test ratio is weaker compared to the industry, the only item that can be affecting the results here is inventory. Right? If you look at the formula just now, the only difference is the inventories. Okay, so it indicates that Excalibur's inventory levels may be too high by comparing this. Okay, so you can see that if we only look at the results of Excalibur Corporation, we may not know anything. All that we know that, oh, for every one ringgit of current liabilities, I have 5.35 ringgit of current assets to pay back. But we do not know how similar firms perform. So we have to compare it with either another firm in a similar industry, or we just compare it with the industry average. Then we get a clearer picture. Oh, in terms of current ratio, they are performing better. But acid test ratio, their ability is not as good as the industry. So what is the problem with this firm? Oh, their inventory levels are probably too high. Okay, so that's how we interpret the financial statements of a particular company. So you can see, we look at the SFP. Okay, we can see, oh, this is their amount of total assets, their amount of liabilities, equity. But we cannot get any useful information from the statement until we calculate the ratios and then we compare it with the industry average. Now we have a clearer picture of the liquidity position of Excalibur. Alright, so that's the part on liquidity ratios. So next we will be looking at asset management ratios.